What's the difference between classical and neoclassical? Both evoke a sense of ancient history. Both represent democracy and the people in some way, and both have the word classical in their name. I'm American, so I was interested in making this video because lots of our government buildings are in the neoclassical style. American neoclassical architecture is also heavily associated with mansions and the rich. But why? What does it mean? I did an art history deep dive to try and get to the bottom of each movement's main themes and historical contexts. This is a very brief overview, and I am sure this analysis has some blind spots, but this is what I learned. In a nutshell, classical architecture comes from ancient Greece and Rome. Advances in engineering, like the arch, allowed classical architects to build buildings bigger than ever before. The most lasting examples of classical architecture served thousands of people at a time. Neoclassical architecture was inspired by the Enlightenment, which was also inspired by ancient Greece and Rome. Neoclassical architecture coincided with the discovery of the lost Roman city of Pompeii and with the founding of America. The ancient Greeks are credited with inventing democracy, and America was famous for establishing the first modern democracy. This video mostly focuses on American neoclassical design, but it is also popular in modern Greece, the United Kingdom, and Western Europe. When you hear the word classic, you might picture something that never goes out of style. In architecture, classical means design from ancient Greece or Rome. Ancient Greece and Rome were some of the first massive civilizations the world had ever seen. People from all over the Mediterranean settled in vibrant and diverse cities. Whenever you get lots of people together in one place, problems and solutions start to arise. Ancient architects responded to the problem of growing populations with engineering, design with purpose. In this case, the purpose was serving the people. This is a pretty classic ancient shape. The top part is called the pediment. The pediment is held up by columns. Decoration usually means prosperity because it means people had time to add pretty little details and they weren't just throwing things up out of necessity like they would during a crisis or war. The three most common columns are Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The ancient Romans swapped the columns for the arch. The arch distributes weight evenly across a semicircle. Symmetry was very important to the Romans, who were just as obsessed with themselves as humans at any other point in history. The architect Marcus Vitruvius believed buildings should be symmetrical because the human body was. He wrote, "In the human body there is a kind of symmetrical harmony between the forearm, foot, palm, finger, and other small parts, and so it is with perfect buildings." This type of symmetrical architecture is sometimes called Palladian, and it sort of makes houses look like faces. Classical buildings used lots of stone, bricks, and mortar because Greece and Rome are on the Mediterranean, which has lots of limestone. Limestone is a rock that forms when mineral-rich water, like seawater, evaporates. Marble is also abundant in the Mediterranean because marble is a form of metamorphized limestone. Almost everything about classical design had a practical reason. Let's look at 3 examples. The most classical building is probably the Pantheon. The Pantheon is essentially a church. The word Pantheon means temple of all the gods. Today, it operates as a Catholic church. It's one of the best preserved of all ancient Roman buildings, in large part because it has been in continuous use throughout its history. It is almost 2,000 years old. The front has a portico, or porch, shaded by a pediment, which is held up by 16 Corinthian columns. The back is a dome, one of the first domes, in fact. It is still the world's largest unreinforced dome, which means nothing is holding the dome up. The dome supports itself. The Pantheon is still one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world. It can serve over 16,000 people a day. The ancient theater of Epidaurus is the mother of modern amphitheaters. 13,000 to 14,000 people can sit here at once. A 2018 study showed that this theater is still one of the most acoustically perfect outdoor theaters in the world, with speech intelligibility remaining nearly perfect at all listener positions. And in a time without speakers, how did they do it? Part of the genius has to do with the land. The theater is built into the side of a mountain, taking advantage of a natural valley. Sound in the valley is amplified as it travels up. The natural amphitheater is a splendid design. The Hollywood Bowl is a modern example of a natural amphitheater. The ancient Greeks believed watching shows in a group had positive effects on mental health. You can still see a performance in the theater at Epidaurus. Colosseum literally means colossal or giant. In its heyday, the Colosseum seated 80,000 people. People would gather to watch animal hunts, war reenactments, and gladiator fights. Gladiator fights were also opportunities for a crude form of democracy. The whole thumbs up, thumbs down thing we see in the film Gladiator is kind of true. The gesture of the missio, thumbs up, thumbs down, was to be given by the numerarius, host of the event, but in order to maintain good social standing, the host had to act like he at least cared about the calls of the spectators. The Roman Colosseum's walls are made from arches, which support the heavy stone. It's busted now because of earthquakes and because of stone looters, but the Colosseum is still an iconic part of modern Rome. They did screen Gladiator here in 2018, which I think is really cool. The Colosseum still brings people together. Classical buildings show us how ancient cities responded to growing populations. The arch, the dome, and the column helped build things bigger. These features would become key parts of neoclassical design. But does neoclassical architecture have the same goals as its ancient counterpart? Does neoclassical architecture serve the people the way that classical architecture did? Let's take a closer look at neoclassical. You know the saying, all roads lead to Rome? Neoclassical architecture basically says you are the center of the world. The Roman Empire officially ended in 476 AD. 1,000 years later, the Renaissance began glamorizing ancient art and philosophy, like the writings of Socrates. When the Enlightenment rolled around in the 1700s, classical architecture was ripe for a comeback. After the ancient cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were uncovered from volcanic ash, people had a never-before-seen glimpse of life in ancient Rome. Symmetry, stone, and pediments popped up everywhere. The Greek revival, as neoclassicalism was first began in Europe. It was inspired by the shapes and ideas of grand empires. I am American, so I have the most experience with American neoclassical architecture. In the United States, neoclassical is a popular choice for two things: government buildings and mansions. I'll get my bias out of the way now. I am not a huge fan of neoclassical. At its worst, I find it pompous, ostentatious, and downright stupid looking. But at its best, it captures the magic that made classical architecture so special in the first place. Neoclassicism is supposed to say, this is for you. You deserve all the splendor civilization has to offer. Neoclassical architecture was supposed to pay homage to democracy, government of the people. From democratic spaces, the neoclassical style of early DC transports us from the New World to the birthplace of Western civilization, the Greek polis and the Roman forum. In the American imagination, the nation's capital took on the shapes and symbols of government by the people. The Capitol sitting on the hill capped with a dome, the White House accessible but neither central nor palatial, and the U.S. Supreme Court, a temple of justice with a watchful eye on the nation's lawmakers. But not even Greek democracy was equal. In ancient Greece and Rome, participation was open only to the worthy. And the ancient world was hardly a shining example of progressive thought. For example, Socrates was sentenced to death for impiety and quote-unquote corrupting the youth. In America, women and Black people could not automatically participate in democracy. To this day, the only legally protected right American women have is the right to vote, because the Equal Rights Amendment did not pass. So, Washington, D.C. kind of bums me out. Still, democratic spaces are an important reminder that the fate of the many should belong to the many. Let's take a closer look at Washington, D.C. The United States Capitol building has basically every element of neoclassical design. It has columns, a dome, a pediment with a decorative frieze, symmetry, And it's meant to serve the people. According to the Washington Post, 30,000 people work in the Capitol building every day. 2,000 people work on the maintenance staff alone. The symmetry of this compound is functional. The Senate meets over here and the House of Representatives meets over here. The original building was made of local sandstone from Virginia, and enslaved people did help build it. Future additions included marble imported from Italy. In Washington, D.C., basically every major building looks like something from the ancient world. The Lincoln Memorial looks like the Parthenon of Athens. The Jefferson Memorial looks like the Pantheon in Rome. The Supreme Court Justice Building also looks like the Parthenon, but the Capitol building is pretty original. I think it's a nice example of both the sense and symbolism of classical architecture. Today, a neoclassical home usually means wealth, especially if you have to import marble. Neoclassical mansions first started popping up in the United States during the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age is a period of time between the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and roughly the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt. It's called the Gilded Age because on the surface everything seemed made of gold, but if you scratch the surface you would find out that everything was really made of crap. This is one of the most chaotic periods of American history. Politicians were blatantly corrupt, income inequality was astronomical, and these new things called millionaires were essentially running the nation. From the History Channel, corporate titans could buy anything they wanted, including politicians. In 1886, President Rutherford B. Hayes journaled, "This is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, no longer. It is a government by the corporations, of the corporations, and for the corporations." Super inspiring. Some of the biggest names in American history, like Stanford and Vanderbilt, popped out of the Gilded Age. This was also the era of the political cartoon, aka the vintage meme. Their wealth was possible for a number of reasons, including a lack of government regulation, the absence of a personal income tax, and cheap labor, which usually came in the form of children and immigrants. From Wikipedia, many of the wealthy had undertaken grand tours of Europe, during which they admired the estates of the nobility. Seeing themselves as the American equivalent, they wished to emulate the old world dwellings on American soil, and spent extravagantly to do so, often seeking to one-up each other. There is something about having the taste of a Roman emperor or a European noble that just gives me a bad taste. Rome fell, and centuries of looking at Roman ruins was supposed to teach us that the higher we climb, the harder we fall. Also, during the not-so-distant French Revolution, the French peasants decapitated every noble person they could get their hands on. Nevertheless, these Gilded Age mansions kicked off a trend of American opulence that continues to this day. Let's check them out. The Vanderbilt Marble House is one of the most famous Gilded Age mansions. This mansion is considered a quote-unquote summer home or cottage for Alva and William K. Vanderbilt. Alva would later divorce William and fight for women's right to vote. This so-called cottage had 4 stories, 50 rooms, and required 36 servants to operate. The Vanderbilts spent $7 million on marble alone. The symmetrical house has a rectangular pediment propped up by lavish Corinthian columns. The house also has friezes of Corinthian columns. These columns are not structural and serve no purpose besides decoration. From the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Marble House was a social and architectural landmark that set the pace for Newport, Rhode Island's transformation from a quiet summer colony of wooden houses to the legendary resort of opulent stone palaces. You can see the Marble House in the TV show The Gilded Age. Madam C.J. Walker was born into a sharecropping family in Louisiana. She built her fortune by selling beauty products to Black women. She told the New York Times, "I am not a millionaire, but I hope to be someday, not because of the money, but because I could do so much to help my race." In 1918, during World War I, she finally built her dream home in Irvington, New York. She said, "Now I am surrounded by all of my dreams come true." Madam Walker's Villa Lawaro features Ionic columns and a white rotunda. Madam Walker only lived here for 2 years because she died in 1919. Her family continued to host Black dignitaries at Villa Lawaro throughout the 20th century, often when the White House would not. The pools at Hearst Castle crack me up. They look like the pools at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, but while that pool is a gimmick designed for family vacations, this pool was made for one family. William Randolph Hearst's father was a senator who literally owned a gold mine. William Randolph Hearst was a newspaperman, and some might call him the father of fake news. His newspapers printed scandalous, dubious news stories designed to sell copies and advance his personal political agendas. Hearst and his homies partied at this mansion for about 25 years. After Hearst and his architect Julia died, the castle was bequeathed to the state of California, who now operates tours. The two pools are the Neptune pool, named after the Roman god of the sea, and the Roman pool, inspired by Hearst's trip to Roman baths. Both pools are swimming and classical motifs. The indoor pool has straight sides and is allegedly very difficult to climb out of. One tour guide called it the most glamorous way to drown. As of today, you can swim in it for $950 a day. It is quite cinematic, and Lady Gaga filmed a music video there. Today, neoclassical architecture is more of a symbolic choice than a practical one. The Colosseum and the Capitol building are big buildings that serve a lot of people. Mansions are big buildings that serve a few people. So what does architecture's homage to the Roman Empire have to say? Does it say, I am a ruler of Rome? Or does it signal a service to the people? I suppose it depends on who is inside. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something and feel like you can think more critically about architecture and what it means. If you liked this video, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you don't miss a minute of art history. Take care, everybody. Cheers.